Hello and welcome to Comic Book Herald's Krakoan Krakoa, where today I'll be digging into the 2019 release of X-Men number 2 by Jonathan Hickman, Leinil Francis Yu, Gerry Alanguilan, Cho and Clayton Cowles, as I continue to explore all elements of the exciting Dawn of X. Be warned, spoilers for X-Men number 2 and X-Force number 1, and really in a lot of ways all of Dawn of X to date. This new 2019 era post-House of X and Powers of 10 for X-Men will follow. I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. If you like Comic Book Herald content, go on over to cbh.com. Except actually, cbh.com doesn't belong to me, so go to comicbookherald.com. That would be better. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel here, or check out the podcast looking for Comic Book Herald's best comics ever. Today I'll answer, how is Jonathan Hickman's X-Men following up on the promise of House of X Powers of 10? What's the theme of X-Men number 2, and how does it connect to Marvel and Hickman history? Predictions and theories for what this issue means for the future of Dawn of X. So, how is Jonathan Hickman's X-Men following up on the promise? X-Men number 2 opens concisely in the wake of X-Force number 1, telling us two things. The X-Men is a tightly woven tapestry, at least for now. I love this. I love the sense that everything is following one issue after the other, and that there is actual coherence and cohesion to the continuity of the X-line. And the second thing this is telling us is Cyclops and family don't seem overly worried about Professor X's apparent murder in the pages of X-Force number 1. I won't go into too much depth here because I've already talked in my X-Force number 1 review about how I think Professor X is very likely not dead and the ways that he might come back and some of the really interesting questions that issue opened. But in the meantime, Cyclops seems pretty chill about this. And you could just say, hey, this is a case of Scott Summers just being the typical professional, the consummate professional, and moving on. But I would actually say probably it's because Cyclops, Prestige, and Cable, the three main players here, the Summers family, because they know better. Otherwise, though, X-Men number 2 is following up on the splitting of Krakoa and Arrako we learned about in House of X Powers of 10, with Cyclops enlisting Cable and Prestige on a mission to go explore a mysterious island. It's all very reminiscent of the X-Men's original encounters with Krakoa, of course, in giant-size X-Men number 1, most famously in 1975. It's also genuinely enjoyable to see Hickman working in a format akin to a lot of what Warren Ellis has been doing in much of his Marvel superhero work this decade. For example, Moon Knight, issues 1 through 6 with art by Declan Shalvey, or Secret Avengers, with more or less self-contained issues that still build to a greater whole. That is the feel and the vibe that X-Men has given so far. They are pretty self-contained, one-off stories, but they're all building in the overall X-Men narrative. So what's the theme of X-Men number 2, and how does it connect to Marvel and Hickman history? The theme is quite clearly fatherhood, with the theme of X-Men's first arc looking more and more like family. Cyclops has been a historically awful father, both in the sense of throughout Marvel history and also as one of the worst fathers in all of history, full stop. Predominantly, I think of the time in Uncanny X-Men when Scott missed the birth of his son, Uncanny X-Men number 201, and then also bailed on Madeline Pryor, his wife, and their newborn son at the first sign that Jean Grey had returned from her Dark Phoenix saga death in X-Factor number 1. Now, on occasion, Cyclops' hand has been forced. Nathan's techno-organic virus and Executioner's song more or less demands the baby be sent to the future to become the once and always Cable. And Rachel Summers is actually a daughter from an alternate timeline, so the fatherhood logistics of that are certainly complicated. But generally, Cyclops has never had much room to actually be a dad. Dawn of X affords him this opportunity, and it's extremely nice. Cyclops getting to be a dad to a relatively young Cable is also the first time I thought Teen Cable had some redeemable qualities. He wants to take him on vacations to Shi'ar Empire, and he's super excited about this when he's sharing this information about an island on Chandalar with Rachel and the young teen Nabel. Nabel. I guess that would be Nate and Cable combined. I'll take it. Let's go with Nabel. He can actually be a dad to a teenager in love with explosions in a way that Cyclops could never be a dad to grizzled old war veteran Cable. This is again, first time Teen Cable has had some potential to me. It's actually a fun dynamic. While on the island, this new island Cyclops, Cable, and Rachel are exploring, we quickly learn that this is some portion of Arakko, Krakoa's mysterious missing lost half. The X-Men encounter here a summoner of Arakko. Now, the Summoner character is a classic Hickman character, mostly flat white with a twinge of black outline and a little bit of design here. See also every book Hickman's ever written, but most notably in Marvel, this style was used for Black Swan, I think, if you read his Avengers run through New Avengers. But, I mean, characters like this pop up in everything Hickman has ever written. It's a design style and sort of a sort of albino white mystery character is in every single book in X-Men that is apparently going to be the Summoners. I'm head over heels, honestly, for the unexpected detail that Summoners can summon demons from Otherworld, connecting this aspect to Excalibur, Apocalypse, and the world of magic, everything we saw in the Teenie Howard written Excalibur #1. The premise here also gave me strong Inferno vibes, teasing some sensible ways that a demon invasion could bring back that sinister secret we saw teased so heavily in Powers of 10 #4. I'd also note here the line, "Time continues to grow short" for Arakko. I really expect this to play into the events of Excalibur because there's a similar sort of nigh unbeatable threat progressing there as well. I think odds are Arakko, Excalibur, everything happening on Otherworld, they are dealing with the same demonic threat, or at least there's the potential that all of those things are tied together. I was not expecting Arakko to arrive this soon, nor was I expecting it to merge with Krakoa quite so easily. From House of 10, or House of X, I had the expectation that Arakko was so embroiled in this secret war Apocalypse knows about that it would remain lost until they could actually access its realm. I kind of thought this would be more challenging. I actually figured this is why Apocalypse was so interested in portals to other realms in Excalibur #1. There's been an interesting, and if you're a mutant on Krakoa, concerning rapid ascension of potential threats to the Krakoan way of life through the first month of Dawn of X. Krakoa is potentially threatened by the usual suspects, human, mutant-hating Reavers infiltrating and murdering, like they did in X-Force #1, but also now demons from Arakko that are just connected to the island, and whatever other realms, like Otherworld, might bring through their portals, right? So, and then, too, think about new mutants in Shi'ar space, and sort of the potential, threats from above in the outer realms of the galaxy that could come onto Krakoa as well. House of X and Powers of 10 gave a sense of a Krakoan nation that is so well put together and protected, and already within a month of Dawn of X books, that really feels like it's no longer the case. There are a lot of threats to the Krakoan way. I'm not getting that wide-eyed thrill I got from House of X and Powers of 10 in X-Men right now, but I am quite enjoying the Hickman era so far. A lot of critics have noted that Leinil Francis Yu feels like the wrong choice for this book, which I find kind of interesting. I really like Yu's art, but I would agree with the general sort of concern that, he's doing work, he's been doing work at Marvel, most recently on books like Captain America with Ta-Nehisi Coates. And that's got a very dark, sort of mysterious political intrigue vibe to it. It's a very good book. It's definitely going to be on consideration for my favorites of Marvel in 2019. By the end of this year, but what you probably struggles with more than anything is sort of the warmth and the family connections that are very much at the heart of what X-Men has been so far, which again, like, things are moving and there are threats, but it's also a book about family, and I can see where people would come in and say, I'm not sure Yu is the fit here, especially with Hickman, for that type of book. One thing I noticed reviewing Fallen Angels, too, was how much patience I have for anything Hickman writes compared to other writers in Dawn of X. I will fully acknowledge there's a baseline of trust from a decade of good comics. That means I'm just here for the plan, and I expect it to pan out. So, speaking of the plan, what's the master plan of Apocalypse? We've been talking about fatherhood, how exciting it was to see Cyclops in that role. We also see Apocalypse in that role. The big reveal at the end of X-Men #2 is that Apocalypse is the Summoner's father, and that the Summoner's mother is the First War. Now, I will note here, Apocalypse could be talking metaphorically, to save all of my children, because he alludes to, the children of Arakko and Krakoa. He could just be talking about, like, mutant kind, and then whatever the summoners are as sort of his metaphorical children. I don't know that the summoner is literally his boy. So I think that's a revelation I came to, but nonetheless, he's treating it very fatherly and very warmly. I also talked about Apocalypse's secret horseman way back in Krakoa #8, but it's nice to see them come into the picture this early after so much teasing. It's also fascinating that Apocalypse is scheming on a wavelength well beyond what we've seen so far from the rest of mutant kind. Apocalypse has plans for Krakoa and Arrako, and now we've seen small inklings of his presence in Excalibur and X-Men. The fact that he mentions saving his children of Krakoa as well doesn't give me Mr. Sinister double-crossing vibes, but I do wonder how much of his planning is aligned with the likes of Moira McTaggart. If Apocalypse having kids seems strange to you, I'd call out this is not even the first time we've seen this. In the Rick Remender written Uncanny X-Force and then Uncanny Avengers, the Dark Angel, he becomes the new Apocalypse and has twins with Pestilence. The Apocalypse twins are major players throughout all of Uncanny Avengers. Likewise, from Age of Apocalypse, we have known Holocaust to be Apocalypse's son, although much like Cyclops, we've never seen Apocalypse as caring, as warm, and as loving as he expresses here in X-Men #2, giving the Summoner a very gentle hug. If the theme here is fatherhood, it's perhaps a bit more specific. Fatherhood seeking redemption. These are both Cyclops and Apocalypse, characters who, while they've been intertwined, for a period of time, Apocalypse was like absorbed into Cyclops' memory right before Morrison's New Mutants. They've nonetheless are obviously pretty typically considered different on the hero-villain scale, but they are both, it would seem, moving in the direction of being the fathers that that we would hold in high esteem. Finally, I have to note that although there's the very sexy joining of islands, Krakoa and Arrako, in the pages of X-Men #2, they very much come together. This Summoner is walking freely around this nation as well. Still, Apocalypse's first horsemen are trapped, or so it would seem. X-Men #2 offers an unexpected development, though, in that the Summoner can communicate with War, or, he calls the individual he's talking to Mother, so I assume this to be the First War. Presumably, these lines of communication would remain open to Apocalypse as well, meaning I expect we'll see the First Horseman sooner rather than later. Again, I was I don't know why, but I just sort of expected the First Horseman and the joining of Arakko and Krakoa to be sort of a big, building to that stage. And in a lot of ways, we still are. But X-Men #2 moves us there a lot faster than I was expecting. And I honestly think this is a good thing. I think the idea that this, the big ideas should be delayed is not how House of X and Powers of 10 has worked, right? You pitch and you throw out these huge ideas and you move through them, and then you get to the next thing. And that's how you keep this line, I think, so exciting. So in conclusion, I really enjoyed X-Men #2. I really, really loved Cyclops trying to be this father to Teen Cable, to Rachel Summers, and seeing Scott Summers at peace in a way that he almost never has been. There's this big difference with Krakoa that he's not the guy. He's not the guy leading mutant kind anymore, which is kind of a role he was in for, from 2008 to 2012 through Avengers vs. X-Men, and then trying to be, really for a lot of the rest of the decade. So it's nice to see him just kind of having family and having time for family, even if that means going on adventures to explore mysterious island nations that are popping up in the middle of nowhere and that Krakoa is making a mysterious beeline for. So thanks everybody for listening. This has been Krakoan Krakoa #18 as I continue to do reviews and theories and predictions for the Dawn of X and the X-Men line under the pen and guidance of writer Jonathan Hickman. Again, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. If you like the content, please go on over to comicbookherald.com, as often as you can for new reading order guides and content and analysis. And please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to Best Comics Ever podcast, Comic Book Herald's Best Comics Ever, where you get your pods. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And as always, enjoy the comics.